Happy Wednesday, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. I want to talk to you about conditions that are unique to dogs when they're suffering. It's something that we all need to know, and I had a viewer write in and wanted to know, how can we tell if our dogs are in pain? How can we tell long enough, have enough predictive information to know that they're dying? Those are really, really good questions, and it's really difficult for a lot of us to be able to tell. It truly is. And here's a couple of reasons why. First of all, if you remember D.H. Lawrence, he was a famous American poet, and the shortest poem he ever wrote was called Self-Pity. And it goes like this: I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A bird, a small bird, will drop frozen, dead from a bough, never ever having felt sorry for itself. So again, it's the absolute truth. I've been out in the wild a good majority of my life, and I've seen death many times in animals. I've seen them right before they did die. And there's always a dignity and there's a grace that accompanies that death, really unmatched in anything I've ever seen in a human being. It's really a unique condition, not just to dogs, but also to any social predator or any predator, even that's more of an isolation type predator, solitary type predator. So a couple things that to kind of help answer that question today is, number one, what makes dogs suffer in silence? Because they truly do. They really do. They suffer in silence. Well, the number one thing that makes that happen is that there's no healthcare system out in the wild. There's none. There's no veterinarians parked out there in the middle of the wild ready to take care of our wolves, and we're ready to take care of lions and their prides, hyenas, East African hunting dogs, you name it. There are none. So there's no healthcare system, which then meant that these animals were genetically hardwired to survive. Hardwired, much so, more so than humans are. And when you're hardwired to survive, you end up not developing a complaining signal. So many times animals have developed so many ways to communicate. Through body English, also through vocalizations. They can communicate with one another. But because I'm hardwired to survive, then that means that's what I'm going to put all my focus on. I'm not going to complain about the circumstances that I find myself in. I've been part of teams, biologists, pathologists that have studied the remains of wolves that were killed either recently by a hunter or killed out in the wild by another wolf. And it was quite remarkable because when you broke it down and you took a look at the animal and dissected part of the animal, you found that most of them are walking around actively hunting, and yet they've suffered at some point multiple career-ending injuries. I mean, broken clavicles, broken ribs, legs that have not reset properly, jaw bones that were broken, eyes that were missing. And yet here are these wolves up and about, moving, not complaining. That's just the way they are. Dogs don't even know that we have veterinarians. Yeah, they may not like to go to a vet hospital, but that's an environment. That's a condition. It's not the veterinarian. They don't even know that you're going to feed them for the rest of their lives. Like wolves, they're hardwired to survive, and they're going to do everything that they can to survive. And when their condition deteriorates to a point where death is imminent, it's within hours or even just a day, you'll see them start to fall back on procedural memory, habits that they would always do in the past. We just lost a cat being a solitary type predator versus a social predator. But nevertheless, Ollie, our cat, would climb up every evening on the back of our sofa on any time that we were there. Not that we were on the sofa every evening, but whenever we were there. And he would just nuzzle into the top of my head. And I don't know why he picked my head, but he did. And he would do that every time we ever sat on the sofa. And the night before he passed, even though he could barely get up there, he did the exact same thing. For them, do they know that the end is near? I'd have to think that they know. I don't know if they know it on the sense that by tomorrow I'll probably be dead. I think they just know it on the sense that it's not right. Something is not right. Animals suffer vulnerabilities when they grow old, just like humans do. There's a sense of failing. Sometimes it's very direct, meaning I got booted away from my pack. I remember that in my book. I wrote about it in my book, Embracing the Wild in Your Dog, when my mentor and I stumbled upon an old she-wolf, probably about 9, 10 years of age. And you could tell she had been recently kicked out of her pack. And the reason being is it's time for the young to take over, time for them to reproduce. You can't reproduce any longer, so therefore nature wants to perpetuate the strong genes and kind of just get rid of the waste. So she really was a waste, an extra mouth to feed in the pack. So she was pushed out of the pack. And when she still wanted to live. So she took on a big moose by herself. And the result was the moose was able to give her life-sustaining or life-threatening injuries, not life-sustaining. And she was all broken up. And yet when she laid there, she was silent. If you looked into her eyes, you wouldn't know that she was dying at that moment. She just regarded us with a look I'll never forget. And there's one of those of peace. One of those, I've done it. I'm going to try and get up here, and if I can't get up, well, then so be it. That's what our dogs tend to do. They're just the same way. They're built, they still have that in them. You know, that's a love-hate relationship that I have with it, because I love the fact that they suffer in silence. I love the fact that they don't complain. I love the fact that they keep trying. The strong wolf moves and lives. The weak wolf lies and dies. And our dogs just keep trying to live. How many of you have owned a dog that are watching this video and found out quite unexpectedly that your dog has a large mass? And if a human was carrying that large cancerous mass in their body, there's no doubt that they would become very symptomatic to it. They would be complaining because of the pain that they have. Yet our dogs don't, and that's how we find out the hard way, the fast way. You take your dog to the vet, and because there's this bulge on the side, and next thing you know, the vet tells you you've got about 48 hours and this dog's going to die. But yet, up to that point, you didn't know a thing about it. It's just dogs. So there is no healthcare system, so nature prepared them, genetically hardwired them to survive. Get up and move. No one's going to bring you food. There's no hospice out here. If you want to live, you've got to get up and try to get something to eat. Try to survive. Because of that, there was no signal ever developed among wolves, and therefore subsequently our dogs, that says, I'm in pain. I'm complaining here. There's no complaining signal. And then lastly, they will often go off by themselves. If they are hurting, they're not going to complain. And you'll see a lot of these social predators move away from the pride, move away from the pod, move away from the pack. And they do so because they don't want to endanger the rest of their pack. They know they're vulnerable. They know they're in danger. They know that another predator is going to take advantage of the opportunity that you can't get on your feet. If I'm an alien wolf, I can eliminate a competitor, and I can do it real quickly without worrying about endangering my own personal fitness. If I'm a bear, I can kill you as well. You're a competitor. I can eat you. So there's danger lurking. And these animals, if there's any blood or if there's any weakness, they just seem to know it. How they know it, I have no idea. But they can hone in on a weak animal like that. And they will. So many times when our pets are suffering, they will move away from us. They'll go into a vacant room. They'll go into the yard. They'll move away from us. And that's one of the signs that you can look for. So when you have an animal that you think is suffering, here's a couple of key signs I want you to pay attention to. Number one, they're going to stop eating. They just will. Their body doesn't need the energy any longer because it realizes I have organs that are failing. And they're just not going to be hungry. They could be in pain. They're just not going to show the pain. And most of these animals will just stop eating. I mean, entirely. You can't get them to eat anything. You can try all the best food in the whole wide world, and they're still going to turn their nose up to it. They'll definitely be less active, for sure. Their body, because it will be super stressed, the body's always up until the last minute trying to achieve homeostasis, trying to have a perfect balance of chemicals, temperature, nutrients, you name it. And therefore, the stress response will be mobilized, trying to achieve that. There'll be rapid breathing and a rapid heart rate. Then you'll see the animal being sensitive to the touch, very sensitive to the touch. This is when all of a sudden you reach over and try to pick up your dog. It tries to bite you. And you go, wow, what was that all about? What caused that? What did I do to cause that? Yeah, you try to move them over. Or you try to touch them and they go away from you. They just get up and wobble away from you. Look for signs of incoherence. Look for signs that I'm dizzy. I can't hold myself up physically. Look for those signs. Also look for one of the most important ones. No matter what you do, no matter how much love you give them, how much you want to pet them, if they move away from you, if they seek out another part of the room, another room in the house, if they move away from you, then more than likely the time is near. And these are about the only warnings you're ever going to get, because again, like D.H. Lawrence said, I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will drop dead, frozen from a bough, never ever having felt sorry for itself. That's the way of the wild. We're not so much like that. They are, and your dogs still have that in them. So look for those signs, guys, because it's the downside of pet ownership, but it's also a realistic side. Animals, they're going to die. There's a biological end to their lives. And if you own one long enough, then that day's coming. Look for it, because when you look for it, we'll talk tomorrow in tomorrow's video what I do next. If I see all these signs that Bryan's been talking about today, all of these, what do I do next? Do I take my dog to the veterinarian? And that may stress my dog out. Or do I just allow it to die a peaceful, natural death? Difficult decisions, guys. It's part of it. And we just have to be prepared for it. And it just kind of takes solace, because one thing that everyone tends to ask themselves after their dog passes is, did my dog have a good life? And I tell everyone, you'll never know if your dog had a good life. What you will be left with is knowing that the life you provided for it was good. So guys, dogs suffer in silence. You may not get the neon sign in the fog. It may not be there. But there will be signs if they're nearing end of life. And then the other things that pop up, tumors, other illnesses that they have, other organ failure that they may have, those signs may not appear until right before the organ does fail, or until the animal becomes in such a state that it's going to be nearing death as well. All right, not a fun subject to talk about, but a very necessary subject to talk about. I hope you found this information beneficial. If you did, share it to someone, especially someone that you know may possibly be dealing with this at this moment, may have a pet that's nearing the end of life. Talk to them about it. Reach out to them. Share this video with them. So therefore, and then tomorrow we'll talk about if you see these signs, what's the next step to do? Okay, guys, if you have any questions of your own, send them in to me, Bryan with a Y at tamingthewild.com, and I'll be glad to answer them for you in future videos. I'll talk to you more tomorrow about what do we do next if we think that our dogs are dying. Sad day, man.